Ross Chapman hated the night shift. It gave him too much time to reflect on the mess he'd made of his life. At 16, he'd left school to work in one of his dad's electrical stores, secure in the knowledge that within a few years he'd be inheriting the old man's mantle, but things hadn't quite turned out as planned. The recession had hit Ross's lack of business acumen head-on, and his mini-empire, which it had taken his dad 3 decades to construct, had come crashing around his ears. Along with the business went the house in the country, the flash cars, and the expensive holidays. And now he, Meredith, and their daughter Jodie lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in Splott, next to the trading estate. And for the last few years, Ross had worked at the garage on Endell Road, often taking on spare shifts to make ends meet. Although he worked hard, he found it difficult to disagree with his teenage daughter's opinion, fostered by her grandfather, that he was one of life's losers. Catching sight of his reflection in the window overlooking the garage forecourt, Ross grimaced. Once he'd been fit and slim, even moderately good-looking. Now, nudging 40, he was podgy, tired, and ground down by life. He looked away with a sigh and distracted himself by tidying the magazine racks. Now and again he glanced outside to see if there was anyone filling up at the pumps. Even for a drizzly Wednesday night in late September, however, it was quiet. At 10 p.m, less than 20 minutes away, he would seal himself in for the rest of his shift with a book or a newspaper, breaking off only to serve the occasional customer through the security grill. The next time Ross looked through the front window, someone was looking back at him. It was a scrawny guy in a bulky black jacket, a scarf concealing the lower half of his face. Alarm bells jangled in Ross's head even before he glanced beyond the figure and saw there was no car at the pumps. As the guy entered, Ross retreated behind the dubious safety of the counter. "Hi," he said, noticing when the guy was a few meters away that his right hand was stuffed deep into the pocket of his jacket. At that moment, Ross knew from the man's coiled stance and staring eyes exactly what would happen next. Sure enough, when the hand rose from the pocket, Ross was not surprised to see that there was a gun in it. The gun was black, chunky, and Ross found it hard to tear his eyes from the circle of the muzzle where the bullet would come out, even when the scrawny guy said, "Open the till." Ross froze. For a moment he couldn't remember how to open the till. He glanced at the gun again and saw that it was shaking in the man's grip. Concentrating as if his life depended on it, Ross stabbed at the buttons and the till pinged open. Scooping out the notes, Ross put them on the counter. They came to £65. "That it?" the man said disdainfully. "Apart from some change," said Ross. He pointed at a metal hatch on the wall behind him. "We're not allowed to keep much in the till. Every so often we put it in the safe." "Open the safe then," said the man. He was shaking and sweating. "I haven't got the key," said Ross. "Open it!" the man screamed. Ross raised his hands. "Look, there's no point," he began. And that was when the man shot him. Ross flinched and closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was somewhere else. At first, he saw nothing but darkness and wondered whether he was dead. Then his eyes adjusted, and he realized he was standing in a small room with bulging walls, dimly lit by a soft light from above. He sensed movement and turned to see a cot-like bed against the wall, containing a cadaverous old man who was struggling to sit up. The man was finding it difficult because of the straitjacket clamping his arms to his body. But by bending and straightening his legs in a concertina motion, he eventually managed it. The old man fixed glittering eyes on Ross and opened a mouth full of yellow teeth. "You know who it is?" he croaked. Before Ross could reply, he was back behind the counter in the garage, the gunman staring at him in disbelief. "What just—" Ross said. As if shocked by his voice, the guy jerked up the gun and shot him again. There was no pain, no sense of movement, of time passing, but suddenly Ross was back in the dimly lit cell, and the old man, sitting up now, was leering at him, his eyes almost bulging from their sockets. "Please," the old man begged, drool spilling from his mouth. "Help me. Make it stop." Then Ross was behind the counter in the garage once more, and the gunman was gaping in terror. "I shot you," the gunman whispered. I... The gun slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. Then, shaking so badly he could barely stand up, he stumbled away, almost falling as he wrenched open the door and fled into the night. Ross stood in the sudden silence,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?